My own family forced me to sleep in the freezing shed while they enjoyed the warmth of the house. I realized I deserved better, and I wasn't going to let them keep taking me for granted. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lark. I live with my parents, Dale and Mira, and my older brother, Jet. They never seemed to notice me. I cooked, cleaned, and helped with everything, but they acted like I was invisible. One winter night, they made me sleep in the shed because there wasn't enough room. I shivered all night while they laughed and stayed warm inside. That was the last straw. I realized I couldn't stay in a place where I was treated like nothing. I started quietly saving money and collecting things that mattered to me, my small savings, family heirlooms, and keepsakes that they never cared about. One night, I packed my things and left, leaving a note, "I won't be invisible anymore." Moving to a new city was scary, but I found a small apartment and a job that respected me. I made friends who valued me and my hard work. Meanwhile, my family started to notice my absence. They argued, looked for me, and realized how much they had taken me for granted. I didn't go back to punish them. I lived my life, stronger and happier. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to show your worth. I took my life back, and for the first time I felt free. If you want, I can also turn this 300-word story into a punchy, 10-part video script for YouTube with hooks and pauses that keep the audience glued. It would feel like a Reddit story come alive. Lark had always been the quiet one in her family. At 24, she handled chores, bills, and small tasks without complaint, but no one seemed to notice. Her father, Dale, focused on work and rarely acknowledged her efforts. Her mother, Mira, was distant, wrapped up in her own world, and her brother, Jet, acted like Lark was invisible unless he needed something. Even small accomplishments went unrecognized. Lark would fix a leaking faucet or prepare meals, yet the only response was a brief nod or passing remark. Birthdays and achievements were barely mentioned. She learned to hide her feelings, to work silently, hoping one day her care would be noticed. Her room was tiny, almost like an afterthought in the house, while her family's spaces were warm and bright. Conversations around her often carried a tone of impatience when she spoke, or worse, complete disregard. Lark never complained openly, she didn't want arguments or anger. She simply wanted to belong and feel appreciated. Despite the coldness around her, Lark had a soft heart. She helped neighbors, volunteered quietly, and dreamed of a life where people valued kindness over noise. Every day, she reminded herself that her worth wasn't defined by their attention. Yet, the constant dismissal left a deep ache. Even as she cooked, cleaned, and followed endless rules, she wondered why she was always overlooked. The house was filled with laughter and warmth, but Lark felt like a shadow, moving silently through rooms that weren't hers. Every glance, every word, every ignored smile built inside her a quiet strength, a resolve that one day, she would step out of the shadows and claim the life she deserved. That night, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows of the house. Snow piled high, and the temperature dropped sharply, but Lark was told she couldn't stay inside. "There's no room for you tonight," Mira said casually, as if it were nothing. Her father and brother settled near the fireplace, laughing over a game of cards, completely unaware of the cold biting at her skin. Lark shivered in the shed, the wooden walls offering little protection. The roof leaked, and she wrapped herself in a thin blanket that barely kept the chill away. Every gust of wind cut through her bones, but worse than the cold was the silence. She could hear the muffled warmth of the family inside, the clinking of glasses, the soft hum of conversation, the flicker of firelight through the windows. She tried to make herself comfortable, stacking old boxes into a small seat, but every movement reminded her of her isolation. The floor was damp, and the air smelled of mildew. Tears pricked her eyes, not just from the cold, but from the realization that the people who were supposed to care for her had cast her aside without a second thought. Lark hugged her knees, wishing she could disappear or vanish into the storm. The night dragged on endlessly, each hour a reminder of how little she mattered to them. Humiliation and anger churned together as she stared through the cracks in the shed wall, watching shadows dance in the warm glow of the living room. For the first time, she felt an unshakable clarity. She couldn't rely on them for love or respect. That night planted a seed in her heart, a determination that she would never be powerless again. The morning after the storm, Lark sat by the kitchen window, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee. The frost outside mirrored the emptiness she felt inside. She watched her family move around, cheerful and unconcerned, as if nothing had happened. That was when it hit her. This wasn't a one-time thing. Every slight, every dismissal, every cold glance had been adding up for years. She thought about all the times she had stayed silent, hoping things would change, hoping someone would notice her effort, her heart, her loyalty. But nothing had changed. The pattern was clear now. She wasn't loved or respected, she was convenient. A shadow in their lives, easily ignored and easily cast aside. Anger mixed with pain, but beneath it, a fierce clarity emerged. She refused to let herself be small any longer. She deserved recognition, warmth, and dignity, things her family had repeatedly denied her. She clenched her fists, breathing deeply, feeling the power of her own determination. For the first time, she allowed herself to think beyond survival. She imagined walking out the door and never looking back, taking with her the life she had always deserved. She began to plan quietly, mentally listing the possessions and memories they had treated as unimportant, things that held value to her, things they had ignored or mocked. In the stillness of the morning, Lark promised herself that she would no longer be invisible. No more silent apologies, no more small gestures for empty thanks. She would leave, and when she did, she would take what she needed, not to punish them, but to reclaim herself. The breaking point wasn't loud. It was steady, quiet, and unstoppable. And in that quiet, Lark found her first taste of freedom. Over the next few weeks, Lark moved carefully, like a shadow in her own home. She started noticing things she had overlooked before, small signs of her family's carelessness and entitlement. There were boxes of forgotten heirlooms tucked away in closets, dusty albums filled with her childhood memories, and documents that revealed money and items she had earned or saved, but that her family acted as if they belonged to them. She made a mental map of everything she wanted to reclaim, not out of greed, but because it represented her life, her effort, and her identity. Each item was a piece of herself they had dismissed, and each discovery made her heart swell with determination. Lark worked quietly, careful not to attract attention. She stored notes and evidence in a hidden folder, documenting years of neglect and moments where her achievements were ignored. She found old drawings, certificates, and letters she had written, all once treasured by her, now gathering dust. She realized that even her family's wealth and possessions had been taken for granted, and that thought fueled her resolve. Every night, after everyone had gone to bed, she would sit in her room with a candle, sorting items, reviewing her plans, and imagining a future where she controlled her own life. She felt a growing sense of power that she had never experienced before, quiet, steady, and certain. By the time winter started to fade, Lark was ready. She had everything she needed, and more importantly, she had the courage to act. The preparation wasn't just about material things, it was about claiming her worth, her freedom, and the respect she had never received. For the first time, she didn't feel powerless. She felt unstoppable. One night, when the house was quiet and everyone slept, Lark moved silently through the rooms. She had planned this moment for weeks, memorizing every creak in the floor and every shadow that could give her away. Carefully, she gathered the items that meant the most to her, a locket her grandmother had given her, journals she had kept since childhood, and the small stack of money she had saved in secret. Each object she packed carried memories and proof that her life mattered. She handled them gently, as if holding her own voice and identity in her hands. Nothing flashy, nothing unnecessary, just the pieces of herself her family had ignored or dismissed. Before leaving, she wrote a short note on a scrap of paper. It wasn't filled with anger or blame, just a quiet message: "I'm taking back what belongs to me. Don't forget that I exist." She placed it where they would find it in the morning, knowing it would rattle them without her needing to confront them directly. Lark stepped outside into the cold night air. The wind bit at her cheeks, but she felt more alive than ever. Every step away from the house was a step into freedom, away from the weight of neglect and dismissal. The dark streets welcomed her, silent witnesses to her courage. By the time she reached the edge of town, she felt a thrill she had never known. She had left the shadow of her family behind, carrying only what proved her worth. She wasn't running in fear, she was moving toward life on her own terms. For the first time, she realized that leaving wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And those who had underestimated her would soon learn that Lark was not so easily forgotten. Lark arrived in a city that felt unfamiliar but full of possibilities. The streets were busy, the lights bright, and for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere that didn't dismiss her. She found a small apartment with a view of the skyline, a place she could call her own without anyone questioning her presence. Her days quickly filled with routine and purpose. She secured a job at a local bookstore, where her dedication and attention to detail were noticed and appreciated. She finally experienced the quiet satisfaction of contributing to something meaningful, and for the first time, her work earned genuine praise. Lark also discovered a community of people who respected her opinions, shared her interests, and valued her company. She joined weekend hikes, coffee meetups, and local events, slowly building friendships that weren't based on convenience or expectation. Laughing without fear of ridicule felt like a new kind of freedom. She spent evenings decorating her apartment, reading by the window, and cooking meals for herself, simple routines that made her feel grounded and proud. Each small victory, from paying her first rent on time to being thanked for her efforts at work, reinforced her sense of independence. Meanwhile, she learned through casual mentions and conversations that her family noticed she was gone. But their worry was superficial, mostly focused on the things they missed rather than the person she was. Lark realized that while they continued life in comfort, she was thriving on her own terms. Every day, she felt lighter, stronger, and more certain. The city that once intimidated her had become a place of opportunity, proof that leaving had not been an escape, it had been a chance to grow. Lark finally knew what it meant to live for herself. Back at the house, silence had settled like a heavy fog. Mira rifled through drawers, muttering about missing items, while Dale grew frustrated, blaming her for carelessness. Arguments erupted over small things, old silverware, forgotten papers, and trinkets that once belonged to Lark. The house felt emptier than before, and the warmth of routine was gone. Jet noticed how awkward his friends became when they visited. He could no longer rely on Lark to smooth things over, and her absence made him painfully aware of how much he had depended on her. The laughter they used to share now felt forced and hollow. For the first time, Mira paused to consider what her daughter had contributed to the household. Simple tasks that had always gone unnoticed, meals prepared, bills organized, memories preserved, were suddenly glaring in their absence. Dale, too, realized that the home ran on invisible effort, and without Lark, everything felt off balance. They tried to replace her presence, but no amount of rearranging or planning could fill the quiet she left behind. Each missing possession became a reminder, each empty corner a symbol of the care they had ignored for years. Slowly, a creeping awareness settled in. They had underestimated her, dismissed her, and taken her for granted. Regret hung in the air, but it was impotent. Lark was already building a life apart from their neglect, and nothing they could do now would restore the trust or recognition they had lost. The realization was harsh and uncomfortable, a bitter taste of their own mistakes. In that emptiness, the family finally understood what they had lost, and it was too late to call her back. Lark didn't return to the house, but she quietly made her presence felt in ways her family couldn't ignore. She began volunteering in local shelters and donating to causes her parents had always overlooked. Through anonymous contributions, she supported neighbors and friends in need, sharing warmth and care that her family had never offered. Word spread slowly of someone helping quietly, but no one knew it was Lark. She watched from a distance as people she once knew benefited from her generosity. She smiled knowing that the same household that had ignored her now lived alongside the consequences of their indifference, seeing her impact without ever realizing it came from the daughter they dismissed. At work, Lark was recognized for her efforts and creativity. Her accomplishments grew steadily, but she never flaunted them. Instead, she let her success speak for itself, knowing that her family could only observe, not participate. Each small victory she achieved reminded her of her strength and independence. Lark also occasionally sent anonymous letters to neighbors and community members, encouraging them, praising their work, or quietly helping with financial burdens. Each gesture carried her signature kindness and intelligence, a subtle message her family could interpret if they cared to notice. She never sought confrontation or revenge in anger. Her satisfaction came from the quiet shift she created. The family, surrounded by reminders of her absence and witnessing the ripple effect of her actions, began to feel the weight of what they had lost. Lark's revenge wasn't loud or vengeful, it was steady, invisible, and transformative. Her absence had become a lesson, her empowerment a presence that could not be ignored. And she thrived in the knowledge that she had reclaimed her life without ever stooping to hatred. Lark sat by her apartment window, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars. She thought about the years she had spent feeling small, overlooked, and unimportant. Every cold night, every ignored effort, every harsh word had left scars, but those scars had also shaped her into someone stronger, sharper, and more certain of her worth. She realized that the love she had sought from her family had never truly existed. Their care had always been conditional, fleeting, and shallow. She had tried to earn their attention for so long, only to find that no accomplishment or sacrifice would ever satisfy them. But now, standing in the light of her own life, Lark felt a freedom she had never known. She had built a space where she could breathe, grow, and be appreciated for simply being herself. Her achievements, her choices, and even her failures belonged to her alone, and she no longer needed validation from anyone who had failed to see her value. In that quiet reflection, she understood something profound. Walking away had not been an act of cruelty. It had been an act of courage. Leaving meant claiming her own story, honoring her own needs, and refusing to let others dictate her happiness. Lark smiled softly, feeling the weight of the past lift. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you hurt you the most, but walking away doesn't make you cruel, it makes you brave, she whispered to herself. I took my life back, and I'll never look back. For the first time, she felt complete. Not because anyone else had changed, but because she had finally embraced herself fully, fiercely, and without compromise. The future was hers, and she would meet it on her own terms, unafraid, and unstoppable. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away from my family, or should I have tried to forgive them? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and hit the bell.